So I asked a question a couple of weeks ago because I was running through some numbers. I was running through statistics, situations I heard about on various shows, encounters with people out in the real world. A combination of a good, healthy combination of both anecdotal and statistical evidence, and also the lack thereof, meaning the lack of certain statistical evidence, right? And I was wondering, are black men actually ahead of the curve compared to other groups of men? Because for those that don't know, the red pill, whatever space, it was founded by white men because they were having issues with their women. Well, black men have always had some issue with the dynamic between black men and women. Even when they were married, apparently it's a good deal of the household in the black community were still run by black women. Maybe it was because of the strain on black men. Maybe it was because if a black man did try to stand up and become worth a damn, he'd be lynched, you know, which did happen because the Great Society was capable of doing that. But today, the reason why the red pill was made and the reason why all this is going on, because mind you, the divorce rate is high in all groups, meaning white, black. I don't know about Hispanic, but white and black, yes, it is 50% or greater. And given, modern day radical feminism, women are pushing for more and more power in society. That's really what it is. It's not equality, it's power. They want more power. So the reason why the red pill was founded was to be aware of the so-called truth, right? But the thing is, what exactly is that truth? Well, one of the truths is dealing with women today is absolutely a risk. You get tied to a woman, you will be subjected to divorce courts, family courts. You'll be locked down by children, as well as if you get married, alimony, potential of alimony, depending on which state you live in, depending on how long you're married to them, and also child support, which, of course, a lot of guys, they just don't, for some reason, they don't take the necessary precautions when they get married, prenups, things of that nature. They don't understand the laws, even though, sometimes the women don't. But the thing is, the risk isn't on their side when you get married. It's totally on the man. So it's your responsibility to understand the risk. Same way when a woman has a child out of wedlock, it's her job to understand the risk to her because the risk is often much greater on her end than it is on the man because she's having a child. It's, et cetera, et cetera. So today's modern women, in general, are not in the slightest bit even close to the more traditional family structure, traditional women of the past, meaning they aren't fit for marriage. Then when the demographic of men whom are the least married and also have the least children, meaning they are less likely to be fathers because they don't have children with a woman, wouldn't they technically be ahead? When they technically be in a position where they don't have a child linked to a woman, or they aren't married to a woman whom, as we know, modern women today, is literally creating chaos within their household. Like, wouldn't they have some sort of advantage over the men that are tied to a woman or a modern woman that is chaotic? This is specifically for the average man, men of upper status and wealth do. Those men don't relatively have problems with the women. It is the average man, the majority of the population, that is having the problems. Now, some men in that category up towards the top, they have higher risk because they have more to lose. So there is like a threshold But overall, once you reach a certain level, once you exert a certain amount of power, the woman you typically knows, okay, it'll be stupid to leave you, unless you can get half in a divorce, which is what a lot of these guys talk about. But if you take the precautions like you're supposed to, that wouldn't be a problem, or at least not as big a problem. I believe you should be in a position of power where it is ignorant or stupid for her to leave you. Unfortunately, a lot of women are willing to do because they are chaotic. Even though you might be able to tell them they can't do better. As long as they got a sliver of hope, they will still believe they can do better. So it's not exactly what you tell them; it's what they believe. So to some extent, the guys that are at the higher bracket, yes, they're still somewhat susceptible. At least not at the tippy top, but like in that kind of transitioning phase. You're not seven figures, but you're still mid to high six figures. So if she thinks she can do better than you, she will take the legal precautions. So coming back to black men, given that we know this, given the risk, are black men ahead? Have we always been ahead? If you look at our music, it went from simp culture to hip hop. They talked about bees and hoes, which aren't women. They are bees and hoes they're talking about, which they talk about bees and hoes ain't shit, which is true, right? I mean, you're not supposed to want to get with a bitch. You're not supposed to want to get with a hoe, hooker, slut, thought. You're not supposed to wipe that up, which is which has been part of hip hop culture. And I get it, the sisterhood, of course, because the majority of them are in that category. They do have high sexual body counts, which by quantity would probably deem them to be hoes. That's why they have issue with it, and that's why they've tried to push that narrative that hip hop and rap music degraded bitches and hoes. They were very specific. They didn't say women. They specifically say bitches and hoes. But I get why they wanted to push that narrative because they didn't want young black men that did listen to this music. And mind you, today the majority of those that listen to that music aren't black. But on its come up, they didn't want young black men to listen to that music because they wanted those young black men to overvalue women, as we claim they do today, to get linked to them, to try to care for them, to try to wife them up, even though they were bitches and hoes. So I get why they wanted to push that narrative. But knowing this, were they actually are black men ahead actually? Like, have they always been ahead? Least married, least uh most unchopped, most group of men, meaning they aren't linked to a woman in general. Now the question is, okay, what can we do with that? Knowing this, what can we do with this? Knowing that these black men aren't tied down, because mind you, a child and a woman, it can slow you down a bit, especially if she's a modern woman, where she does take that route of the court system, taking whatever it is you have built, especially if you were married to her, and the whole divorce court system. I get it, yes, but that isn't an issue for the majority of black men. The 80-20 rule, we looked at who is birthing these children by the majority of black women. When yes, majority of black women do have kids. Majority of black men, however, do not. It's somewhere between 60 to 63%, something like that, of black men don't have children, aren't paternal fathers. Now, men where they adopt kids, but like actual genetic fatherhood, it's around 60, 63% that aren't fathers. meaning they might willingly become a father of someone else's kids, which of course we know stepdads. Shout out to y'all. I can't do it, but someone does, or you guys are capable of it. Shout out to you. Majority of black women, however, roughly that same 60%, have kids. We already know most of them are outside of wedlock. 80-20 rule, which is a statistical fact. It is very true in much of the things we do. 20% of the men are responsible for 80% of the children born in the black community. And yes, by majority, that 20% are the men at the bottom, by majority. Meaning the black men that are fairly well off tend to tie to a woman today, which modern woman today we know to the average man, which is the majority of men, is a big risk, extreme risk to them, to get married to them, to have children with them. So are black men ahead of the curve? I'm definitely gonna have to dive into this, get to the numbers. But there's one thing I forgot to mention. There seems to be a lack of information that actually explains this. You know, you could try to Google how many black men are childless, and guess what you get? You get a bunch of crap about how black women are single mothers and stuff. Like, Google it, look it up for yourself and see what I'm talking about. You'll get a whole bunch of crap about black women because they don't care about doing the studies on the black men. So I'm making this claim that I actually think black men are actually ahead of the curve. The black men that I know are doing stuff, the black men that I know aren't tied to a woman, I'm making the claim I believe they're actually ahead. And the problem with that, with me making that claim is if there is an agenda to make sure black men aren't ahead, if we are ahead, they sure as hell aren't going to be singing it to the top of their voices. You know, they're not going to make it known. In fact, I'd go so far as to say they'd make sure it doesn't get out. What you might not know is the studies that are published, they run many more studies than what they actually publish. So there could be institutions, and I am aware of some, where they run studies trying to prove one thing about a certain demographic, and then it comes out it's actually a completely other thing. And you know what they do with that study? They trash it. If it doesn't prove their narrative, they trash it. They're like, we tried to prove that black men are a bunch of deadbeat dads out here, and we actually proved that. We don't need that study. We're not going to publish this study. There must have been some error or something with the data. We're not going to publish this study. Do the digging for yourself. Look into it. And I am aware of stuff that is how it's signed. Unfortunately, that is how some of these publications, the scientific community does work, unfortunately. So are black men ahead? We might have to do the research ourselves. Shout out to Dr. Tia San Johnson, Institute of Black Male Studies. One of the only places I know of that is doing any kind of significant study or work for black men. Something to think about.